Greetings to one and all for one, one for all. Super Wednesdays here in the Holy Apple. We're on the 22nd day of the 8th month of Mar Cheshvan 5779. Like many times, this class today was not really supposed to be the scheduled class today. We were supposed to have a summarization of the dangers. Danger ahead, beware, the grace of nations. A tremendous summary of the topic from all angles. But as life turns, or as the world turns, sometimes you got to go with the flow, you got to go with the punches. So today's class, with God's help, is titled The Pittsburgh Massacre, the Jewish Wake-Up Call. This class that we are going to delve into, with God's help, will have three headlines, three parts to it. Not necessarily three different classes, but there will be three subjects that we will relate to. Subject number one is the Jewish wake-up call, the handwriting on the wall, smell the coffee, however you want to say it, for the Jewish people, Jewish community in America. Second headline, second subject we're going to deal with is the Pittsburgh platform. Pittsburgh platform and the connection to the tragedy and the massacre that occurred in this specific temple. Okay, I'm sure that most of us out there in YouTube land are not familiar with the Pittsburgh platform, but there's a very, very straightforward spiritual reason that we might choose to understand what happened in this temple in Pittsburgh. Now, doesn't mean it's, of course, the only reason, and we don't have our prophecy hat on, but we have our eyes, and we have our glasses, and we see the pattern. Third subject will be are the martyrs of the Pittsburgh Massacre in the Temple of Tree of Life, are they holy? Many times when a Jew is killed by a non-Jew, because of the fact that he or she is Jewish, they are coined by the Jewish community as holy martyrs. Is this true? So, we'll take it from the top. It's frightening to consider. It really goes to the core of your soul when you think about the fact that this tragedy happened on Shabbat, on Sabbath, which we read the portion of the week called Vayera. During the portion of the week, number one, we have there a destruction. It was the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. So we have a destruction. We have a destruction at the temple, Tree of Life. Number two, of course, we have the Abraham bringing his son Isaac up to the mountain of Moriah to sacrifice his son. And here we have 11 sacrifices, kind of a continuation, but this time real time. Take two for Akedat Yitzchak, from the sacrifice, the binding of Isaac, some 3,500 years ago. Last but not least, there was also a circumcision at this temple. And of course, our portion of the week, last week, Vayera, opens up with the fact that Abraham had just performed a circumcision at the age of 99. And the whole story unfolds, takes it from there, take it from the top, the story unfolds. So we see unbelievable connections, as always, as we know that any of the current events are listed, are written in the portion of the week. We just have to open up our eyes and open up our hearts and our minds, and we will see what happened during the past week. We could see the connection after the events occur. We see the events in the portion of the week. So that's pretty frightening, those similarities between the two. On the past Saturday, the Jewish date was the 18th of Cheshvan, Mar Cheshvan. 28 years ago, on the same day, different city, in New York, our great leader, the leader of the generation, Rabbi Meir Kahana, of saintly memory, he was murdered in the Marriott Hotel in New York. Same date as the massacre in Pittsburgh. And as we know, in life, in Judaism, in Torah, there are no coincidences. Everything is a sign from above. Everything is connected. And it's not by chance, it's not haphazard that this event took place on the memorial of Rabbi Kahana. More so, the last day that Rabbi Kahana was in this world. He spoke for an hour and 45 minutes. Now, the only person I know that could speak so long is like Rabbi Mizrahi. When I see one of his classes, 1.5 hours, 2.5 hours, I mean, I don't know how he does that. I'm here, I'm here for 40, 50, an hour and 10 minutes, going to, putting the pedal to the metal, going to the max. And whoa, I need to kick back over here. I need to hang loose. So I don't know how he did that. 1 hour and 43 minutes. It's an amazing idea. Rabbi Kahana, his last talk was in New York, and he spoke about the group that he had formed called Zero, which was is an emergency aliyah, an emergency evacuation of the Jewish people from America. The evacuation of the Jewish people. Okay, it's called Zero. It's an acronym, each letter. So this was his subject. Amazing. His last words in this world was a wake-up call to the Jewish people. Was the writing is on the wall. And this was 28 years ago. And you listen to it, and it's as if you're hearing today's news. That was his last call. That was his last words. His message to all of us. Get out. Liquidate the exile before the exile liquidates you. And it's an amazing thing. On this day, Rabbi Kahana was eliminated. This was a sign for the Jewish people. Rabbi Kahana was blown away. People that thought, oh, maybe it's just him. It's not everybody. It's not the Jewish people. It's just him. He was the bad guy. And he got blown away. But we don't have anything to worry about. Anyways, 28 years later, fast forward, on the same day that Rabbi Kahana was taken from the world, and we see the dangers in America, we saw 11 Jews blown away in Pittsburgh. Now, listen closely. One of the leaders of this Tree of Life temple, his name is Jeffrey Myers. And this is what Jeffrey Myers had to say. He's one of the leaders there. Okay, I'm not going to call them rabbis because they're not. So we'll call him the leader of that. Now this Tree of Life, it actually has 3 congregations there. There are 3 congregations there. And the reason why there's so many is because of the fact that as the years go by, the age of the community is going up, and therefore there's not a big future for their community. If you looked at the ages of the Jews that were murdered, you'll see that the youngest was, if I'm not mistaken, either in the mid-50s or mid-60s. And it went up to 70s, and there were some in the 80s. Maybe even one was 91. So this, if you look at the history of that community out there in Squirrel Hill, you'll see that that's it's kind of like a dying community over there. So listen to the words of Jeffrey Myers. Tree of Life has been in Pittsburgh for 154 years. Amazing. Now this you have to understand. This was a hit on a cornerstone, on a foundation of American Jewry. This was no, fly-by-night. This place represents roots, Jewish roots, in a foreign country, in America. This was a hard hit. 154 years we've been in Pittsburgh. We're not leaving this corner, Myers said. We will be back, and we will rebuild, and we will be even stronger. Jeffrey Myers really got the message, didn't he? Listen to the following news items. Very important stuff. I'm going to go through a few of them. Report number 1. According to an annual report by the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, issued earlier this year, the number of reported anti-Semitic incidents in the U.S. surged by 57% in the last year. This was the largest single-year rise since the ADL has begun tracking such crimes 1979. From 1979, we're talking about almost 40 years of tracking the anti-Semitic activities in America. The past year saw a rise of 57%. 57%. This is an amazing figure because Rabbi Kahana was in his 58th year of his life when he was murdered. Same number. And his message, the last message in the Zero Conference, was liquidate the exile before the exile liquidates you. Second piece of news item. Listen closely. This rabbi that I'm going to quote, I know him personally from Los Angeles. Listen to what he's saying. I never remember him speaking in such a language. I'm afraid to say that we may be at the beginnings of what happened to Europe. The consistent anti-Semitic attacks, said Rabbi Marvin Heyer, founder and dean of the Simon Wiesenthal Center in Los Angeles, who prayed at Mr. Trump's inauguration. He spoke in a phone interview from Austria where he was visiting the Mauthausen concentration camp. He continued, if it is not nipped in the bud, he continued, I'm afraid the worst is yet to come. Until recent years, many Jews in America believed that the worst of anti-Semitism was over there. The beginning of what happened in Europe, the beginning, Rabbi Marvin Heyer. I'm afraid the worst is yet to come. Number 3 news item. Years ago, American Jews felt very welcome in America. American Jews were welcome in universities, country clubs, corporate boards that once excluded their grandparents. They married non-Jews. Mazal tov, you know, that gives us a streak of pride. They married non-Jews. They moved into mixed neighborhoods. Also, a big smile on our face, just great. And by 2000, the year 2000, the first Jew ran for vice president on a major party ticket. Jewish nachas, Jewish happiness here, yeah. So the massacre on Saturday of 11 people in Pittsburgh synagogue by a man who told the police when he surrendered that he wanted all Jews to die was for many a shocking wake-up call. Not for Jeffrey Myers, not for him. Not for him. We're going to become stronger. We're not leaving this corner. We will build. This kind of evil makes me think of the Holocaust and how people can be so cruel, that there's so much evil in the world still, said Moshe Taub, 91, a retired cantor from Congregation Beth Shalom in Pittsburgh and a survivor of the Holocaust. This Holocaust survivor, he is remembering. This reminds him of his own Holocaust. But it did not come out of nowhere, say experts in anti-Semitism. At the same time that Jews were feeling unprecedented acceptance in the United States, the climate was growing increasingly hostile, intensifying in the 2 years since Donald J. Trump was elected president. And it comes at a time when attacks on Jews are on the rise, also in Europe as well, with frequent anti-Semitic incidents in France and Germany and other places. The hate in the United States came into full view last year as white supremacists marched in Charlottesville, Virginia, with lines of men carrying torches and chanting, "Jews will not replace us." Swastikas and other anti-Semitic graffiti have been cropping up on synagogues and Jewish homes all over the country. Jews online are not online like you're online in the supermarket. Jews like online are subjected to vicious slurs and threats. Many synagogues and Jewish day schools have been amping up security measures. We ain't finished. Recently, next article. Recently, George Soros, who happens to be Jewish, somebody sent him a pipe bomb. Another in Andrew County, attorney lawyer, Josh Hawley, running for Senate. His sign, "Vote for Josh Hawley," sprayed with swastikas. And the beat goes on. Open up your eyes. 2 days ago, Crown Heights, 2 Jewish girls attacked with rocks. Brings us like back to the good old days, you know, with the Arabs and the rocks. In Brooklyn, in Crown Heights, weekly attacks on Jews. In Los Angeles, 2 days ago, a Jew blown away on the streets, killed. In Chicago, a Jew coming back or heading to synagogue, blown away and killed in Chicago. It's all over the place. And the Jewish people and the Jewish leaders are still slumbering, sleeping well. Smell the coffee. Wake up. Our sages tell us an amazing Torah. It's brought down in a few places. It's in Breshit Rabbah 33:8. It's also, you could look it up also in Yalkut Shimoni on the portion of the week of Noah. Eventually Noah sends a dove to find out if there is dry land. And he sends out of the ark, sends out this dove. And the dove comes back because that's a sign that the water is still high and there's no resting place for the dove. So he comes back. And listen to this. There's a similar verse in Deuteronomy. There's a portion called Kitavo. It's the blessings and the curses. And the greatest curse, according to our sages, there are 98 curses in that portion called Kitavo, Deuteronomy. But what is the greatest of all the curses? The greatest. There's a lot of them. 98, baby. What is the greatest? What is equal to all of them? The one that is equal to all is the one of the exile. The Jewish people being tossed out of the land of Israel and being scattered in the lands of the world, nations of the world, in the countries of the world. This is the harshest punishment of all. So what are we going to say today? How comfortable people have gotten. This is very dangerous. And we see now things are changing. Before we get to this, one more. Now listen closely. There's an unbelievable website. It's worthwhile to check out. It's by a fellow named Michael Snyder, not a Jew. And he has an amazing website that's called the Economic Collapse. And he documentates all of America's woes, economic woes, and social. Listen what he writes 2-3 days ago on his website, The Economic Collapse. We will someday, Michael Snyder, we will someday look back on October 2018 as the turning point. As the month began, people were generally feeling pretty good about things, and the U.S. stock market quickly set a new all-time high. But from that point on, the wheels fell off for Wall Street. We just witnessed the worst October for U.S. stocks since the financial crisis back in 2008. And at this point in time, more than $8 trillion of global wealth has been completely wiped out. Clear your ears out. You heard that number right. $8 trillion been completely wiped out. But it's not just the stock market that is being shaken. The horrific violence in Pittsburgh is just the latest in a string of events that have rattled this entire nation. Sometimes I feel like I'm literally watching the fabric of our society come apart right before my eyes. Go back to that video, the last video of Rabbi Kahana, when he speaks about the present, then 28 years ago in America. He talks exactly about this point, about this society, the fabric of society, which is coming apart. It is almost as if there is a tangible presence of evil in the air. You could touch it. And it seems to be getting stronger over time. For quite some time, I've been warning that levels of anger and frustration are rising to unprecedented levels. And all of that anger and frustration is leading people to do things that are absolutely unthinkable. And if people are this crazy now, how bad are things going to be once the economy really starts unraveling? A Gentile, he sees it. And the Jewish people, Laila Tov, good night. They're out for lunch somewhere. Sees it. What's going to be? October. Remember, October 2018, a turning point. Back to our sages. Our sages, blessed memory, they connect the same languages used, the same words. That it says in Deuteronomy 28, it says there that the Jewish people in the exile will not find rest for their feet. And it says by the dove in Genesis, in Noah, it says that the dove did not find rest for its feet, for its legs. The same exact terminology. And our sages connect them. It says, you know what? Because if the Jewish people would ever find permanent rest in the exile, they would forget about the land of Israel. They would not come back to the land of Israel. And that's not part of the history. That's not part of the program, God's program. We were brought into this world to come to the land of Israel, to set here a separate, a special, holy nation, a nation of priests, a light. That's what we came to the world to do, and not to get stuck up in the exiles of the world. So therefore our sages tell us something frightening, that there might be temporary rest, there might be temporary peace and wealth and the good life, but it's only temporary. And when that changes, when the good life comes to an end, they're going to be looking for that scapegoat. And the most prevalent, in fact, in this attack in Pittsburgh, what caught the guy's eye, what caught this guy, may his name be erased, what caught his eye was that there was an organization, forget exactly the acronym of the organization. HIVS. There we go. Right.
Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society.
Okay, HICE, right. And there, the Jewish people, okay, they're very, very visible in many, many incidents. When you see a lot of, when you see a lot of the stuff that's going down in Hollywood, or a lot of bad stuff, scandals, etc., you see a lot of Jewish names, and people will never forget those names. They will remember. Other names they will forget, but they're not going to forget those names. So the Torah teaches us a tremendous Jewish lesson. The Jewish lesson that we've seen over and over and over again, and we still haven't learned anything from history. We won't say the slogan about those that don't learn from history. We won't say the slogan. But we see that this is a temporary situation of wealth, prosperity. But it comes a day when the music stops and it's time to look in the mirror. Time to put the cards on the table. That time is now. That time was yesterday. That time was a week ago. But now it's late. But at least today, let's wake up. So that's the lesson of the dove. That's the lesson of the exile. If it was good for the Jewish people in the exile, the Jewish people would forget about the land of Israel and forget about their mission, and they would remain in the exiles. That will never happen. Another amazing work before the Holocaust by the saintly Meshech Chochmah. Meshech Chochmah has a commentary, a 3-volume commentary on the Torah, and this is really prophetic. This is really prophetic. He says this on, again, this is Rav Meir Simcha of Dvinsk. He wrote this before the Holocaust on Leviticus 26:44. Here's what Rabbi Meir Simcha has to say. The way that divine providence works is that God gives the Jewish people a certain amount of resting time. That sometimes it's close to 100 years, and sometimes it might be 200 years. And after that, a tremendous wind, a tremendous storm will come and uproot everything in its way. Everything in its way. It will destroy, and it will bring a tsunami, a wave of water, and will not have mercy. And why is this? Because of the fact that we have forgotten that we are strangers in the lands of the nations. And we begin to think, this is amazing, before the Holocaust, we begin to think that this is our homeland. Yeah, we had tremendous joy of the Jewish community some months ago in a baseball game with the New York Mets. I forgot who they were playing. And an up-and-coming Jewish Hasidic singer, he, in front of thousands, tens of thousands of people in, I think it was Shea Stadium, he sang "God Bless America." And you hear the words, and you can't believe a guy with the side locks, with the peyot, and with the beard, and he's singing this song as if this is our homeland. A Jew always, wherever he is, where are you from? I'm from the land of Israel. That's how a Jew thinks and believes and knows. That's the truth. Israel is our home. We happen to be temporarily maybe somewhere else, but we are from the land of Israel. And this wind and this storm will come and will remind the Jew that you are a Jew. We will remind you that you are a Jew. And then will come another hurricane, another tornado. And we'll say, go out of here. Like Abraham was commanded to go to the land of Israel, this is the opposite. Get out of here. And those will think, listen to this, he goes on. He will think that Berlin is Jerusalem. Until this big hurricane comes and will remind him that Berlin is not Jerusalem. Amazing commentary by Rav Meir Simcha. So, folks, our first base that we're touching on here is the wake-up call to the Jewish people. It's time to come home. That should be the lesson of the Pittsburgh Massacre. To understand where the winds are blowing, the evil, the hatred. The middle class in America is being totally annihilated, wiped out. The economical crisis, if not today, it will be tomorrow. I was thinking, Rabbi Kahana said what he did, it was 28 years ago. Hashem, God had mercy on us, and He's waited this long. But how much more? How much more time? Okay, our next subject is the conservative and reform movements. Is there a connection here between the massacre and these movements? So listen closely. Here's a little bit of a history lesson. Tree of Life Temple was formed in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1864 as a breakaway group from Rodef Shalom, that means to run after peace, an Orthodox synagogue founded in 1854, which began adopting reform practices following the visit of, quote-unquote, Rabbi Isaac Mayer Weiss to the city of Pennsylvania. We spoke about at the beginning of, this headline of ours, it's called the Pittsburgh Platform. The Pittsburgh Platform, one of the pivotal members of putting this document together, as we will soon hear what it has to say, was this rabbi, so-called Rabbi Isaac Mayer Weiss. It's interesting that, this guy was around, he was around 150 years ago, and now the leader is called also Myers or Mayers, same name, same blindness. So what happened? This guy Weiss comes around to the city and he starts talking, and therefore there was a split. Because originally this Tree of Life, it was a Orthodox synagogue, and then they became influenced by the reform practices that were espoused by this wise fellow. The initial group of 16 members of the Tree of Life congregation met in the home of Gustavus Grafner. They called it Eitz Chaim, the Tree of Life. Eventually they bought, in 1883, they bought a former Lutheran church, and from then on, they stopped calling it Eitz Chaim. They called it in English the Tree of Life. I guess up until 1883, they called it Eitz Chaim. Afterwards, in 1883, the congregation, they shortened the traditional Orthodox prayer service, and in 1886 became affiliated with the JTS, the Jewish Theological Seminary Association. Around 30 years later, the congregation joined the national conservative network called the USA, United Synagogues of America. Beginning in the 1920s, the Tree of Life shifted further towards left-wing conservatism. Amongst the direction of Herman Halperin, who led the congregation for 45 years, among the practices Halperin instituted were organ music during the prayer services, the elimination of a second day of the festival observances. Every Jewish holiday outside of Israel has a second day. The election of women to the temple's board of trustees, the calling of women to the Torah reading, and the counting of women as part of the minyan. Later on, because of in the 2000s an aging membership and the migration of the Jewish community to suburban neighborhoods led to a decrease in synagogue membership. Therefore, they rented space to another group called Or L'Simcha, Light of Joy. And in 2005, they were losing more people, and so they now have a reconstructionist. There's a reconstructionist group there that shares the building. Now, what is the Pittsburgh platform? What influenced the Tree of Life congregation to leave its Torah and Judaism and Orthodox ways was this fellow who was one of the influential persons that put together this Pittsburgh platform in 1885. This is a document in the history of the American Reform movement in Judaism that called to adopt a modern approach to the practice of their faith. Let me read just a few. There are 8 principles here. There are 8 principles in this Pittsburgh platform. I'll just read a couple of interesting lines over here. Number 1. We hold that all such Mosaic and rabbinical laws, for example, to regulate our diet, laws of kashrut, making sure your food is kosher, priestly purity, that if you're a priest you have to make sure that you don't defile yourself and go into impure places, and dressing in a certain fashion with the tzitzit, etc. Originated in ages under the influence of ideas entirely foreign to our present mental and spiritual state. They fail to impress the modern Jew with a spirit of priestly holiness. Their observance in our days is apt rather to obstruct than to further modern spiritual elevation. Come on down, yeah. Okay, another one. We recognize in the modern era of universal culture of heart and intellect the approaching of the realization of Israel's great messianic hope for the establishment of the kingdom of truth, justice, and peace among all men. That's the messianic times. We consider ourselves no longer a nation, but a religious community, and therefore expect neither a return to Palestine nor sacrificial worship under the sons of Aaron, or any restoration of any of the laws concerning the Jewish state. And the beat goes on, but that's enough. There's also a lot of interesting stuff here. Why do I bring this up? Because we know that the leader of the Jewish community, the true Torah Jewish community in America, for 40, 50 years was the saintly Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. And Rav Moshe Feinstein has many, in his questions and answers, he has many times where he addresses questions and answers towards conservative and reform groups. Usually he's dealing with conservative, so you could times it by what he would say about the reform movement. But we have to understand that this massacre, it took place, it could have taken place all over the world. I mean, there's Jews all over the place. It happened here. It happened in a community, in a temple that has been there for 154 years. There is a message to this. This is the foundation of American Jewry. And we have to understand, how is this group to be looked at? Because we know that when push comes to shove, if we, the Jewish people, are spiritually defiling ourselves, if we are polluting ourselves, if we are going in the ways of the nations, if we are becoming more non-Jews, just like in Germany, which was the capital of assimilation back in pre-Holocaust times. So we have to understand that if the Jewish people, we're all connected, and if somebody in your boat is making a hole in that boat, everybody is going to be affected because of this one idiot. So how is this group looked at? And this is where the attack was. Because these groups, the conservative and reform movements, are bringing tragedy upon the Jewish people. The Jewish people are disappearing. Reform and conservative movements, we are disappearing. Who's responsible for the disappearing Jews? These movements, such movements as the conservative, the reconstructions, and there's so many more today. They are responsible. Because when the Jewish people are not spiritually up, then the nations of the world can come and subjugate the Jewish people. That's how it works. It's a seesaw. When the Jewish people are up spiritually, then the nations do not control us. Nations cannot affect us, cannot harm us. But that's not the situation today. So let's look at a few of Rabbi Feinstein's Jewish law. He was asked, can a person go into a conservative synagogue and pray, not with, of course, the congregation, but could he go to a separate room in the building and bring in another 9 or 10 people who are religious and have a prayer there? And this is brought down in Orach Chaim 4, that's book number 4, answer 91. Rabbi Feinstein clearly writes that you are not allowed to go into a conservative synagogue, temple, whatever they call it. And of course, that was the question, conservative, but of course, reform is the same, reconstruction, whatever you'd like. Agnostic, there's a lot of names going here. You are not allowed to go into that place to set up a kosher, separate prayer. In Orach Chaim, volume 3, question 21, or Orach Chaim, volume 2, questions 50 and 51, he says straight out that these leaders of these movements, these so-called rabbis, some guess today they also have female rabbis, they are heretics, kofrim, heretics. If you get the gist here, these places have similar laws to churches. Just like a Jew is not allowed to enter a church, we are not allowed to enter a place of conservative or reform or whatever, the list goes on. The beat goes on. And he says, he was asked, are we allowed to call the so-called rabbis, and when they come to the Orthodox, to the religious community, and they come to a festival or to an occasion, family member, they come to us, are we allowed to give them an aliyah to the Torah? Are we allowed to call them up to say a blessing over the Holy Torah that they do not believe in? And he says straight out, of course not. We are not allowed, even though they might be family members, you know, and somebody might be hurt or something, you're not allowed to call them up to the Torah. These people are considered to be heretics. So therefore, this brings us to our next point. Maimonides, on his in the tractate of Sanhedrin, he has a pregame article that he wrote there. And he says an amazing thing. Listen closely. This is an amazing thing to remember all our lives. Maimonides says the following. Maimonides brings down that there are 13 principles that the Jewish faith stands upon. I will read them quickly. This is an art scroll Siddur. I believe, number one, I believe with complete faith that the Creator creates and guides all creatures, and that He alone made, makes, and will make everything. 2, I believe with complete faith in the Creator that there is no uniqueness like His in any way, and that He alone is our God, who was, who is, who always will be. Is, was, will be. 3, I believe with complete faith that the Creator is not physical and is not affected by physical phenomena, and there is no comparison whatsoever to Him. 4, I believe with complete faith that the Creator is the very first and the very last. 5, I believe with complete faith that the Creator, to Him alone, it is proper to pray and is not proper to pray to any other. 6, I believe with complete faith that the words of the prophets are true. 7, I believe with complete faith that the prophecy of Moses, our teacher, was true, and that he was the father of all prophets, both those who preceded him and those who followed him. 8, I believe with complete faith that the entire Torah, now in our hands, is the same one that was given to Moses, our teacher, by God. 9, I believe with complete faith that this Torah will not be exchanged, nor will there be another Torah from the Creator. Blessed is His name. 10, I believe with complete faith that the Creator knows all the deeds of human beings and their thoughts, as it says. He fashions their hearts altogether. He comprehends all of their deeds. 11, I believe with complete faith that the Creator rewards with good those who observe His commandments and punishes those who violate His commandments. In one of these documents, in a Pittsburgh platform, they say there that they do not believe in the world to come or in hell and heaven. Not part of their platform. Going on. 12, we believe in complete faith coming of the Messiah. Even though He may delay, nevertheless we anticipate He will come. And the last, I believe in complete faith that there will be the resurrection of the dead whenever the wish emanates from the Creator. Blessed be He. Now listen closely. After enunciating these 13 principles, Maimonides says the following. That a person might have many sins. As long as that person, they might be great sins, they might be middle of the road sins, they might be not so grave sins, all kinds of sins. And they might have millions of those. But as long as they believe in the 13 principles that Judaism stands on, even though they are weak, even though they do not have a backbone, even though they fall to their evil inclination, they are still in the Jewish ballpark. We have all the commandments. They are still part of the Jewish community. However, Maimonides concludes that if a person might have very many good deeds, but he does not believe in one of the principles, that's called strike three. He is out of the ballpark. He might have good deeds and might have a lot of good intentions, but if he does not believe in one of the 13 principles, he is not considered to be in the body of the Jewish people. He is an outsider. Maimonides, you might say, well, maybe that's not the law. Listen to this law. In his book, in his Jewish law book called Shoftim, Judges, chapter 1, law 10, laws of Jewish mourning, M-O-U, not M-O-R, says the following: any person that has removed from himself the yoke of commandments from God, they are not considered to be part of the Jewish people. Those that do not consider them to be themselves to be part of the Jewish people, those that do not consider themselves responsible for the commandments, those that don't feel responsible for Jewish holidays or sitting and praying or learning Torah, they are free to themselves like all other nations, and they are considered to be heretics. And these people, when they pass away, we do not mourn. Exactly the opposite. Not only don't we mourn, but their relatives are supposed to wear white clothing. Usually when you think of death, we think of, somebody wearing the black clothing. They should wear white clothing and don themselves in white, all over white. And they should eat, and they should have a festive meal, and they should have festive drinks, and they should be happy. Because a enemy of the Jewish people has passed away. And that is why King David says in his Psalms, I hate those that hate God. So, we see here, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, the leader of the Jewish community for dozens and dozens of years, calls them heretics, not allowed to go into their temples, into their synagogues. We see Maimonides, that you could be a person that you cave into all of your desires. You do so many sins, but you believe in the principles that the Torah is true and that there is a true God. You're still in the ballpark. The other Jews are responsible for you still. You still have a chance. However, those that might have good deeds but do not believe in one of the 13 principles, 3 strikes and you're out. And we see this in the Maimonides laws. Question is, what is the law of the followers? The followers of these movements. Myself, I'm sure others of you, we have family members who are disconnected, not connected, maybe some of them go to conservative or reform. How are they looked? So we have 2 different groups. We have the leaders. We have those like Isaac Mayer Weiss, who Pittsburgh Platform. And we have the Tree of Life and their other cohorts that were once religious, once Orthodox, no longer today. And we know that this is bringing tragedy. We see it in front. We see it via the statistics. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to get it. The destruction of the soul of the Jewish people. We see it in front of our eyes. But this is also bringing, assimilation assimilation by the leaders of the conservative and reform movements, reconstructionist movements. They are also bringing the level of anti-Semitism up against the Jewish people. As we stated, when there is a spiritual decline within the Jewish people, that empowers the nations of the world to subjugate the Jewish people. That brings hate amongst the Jewish people. We see in Egypt, when the Jewish people, after the death of Joseph, when the Jewish people stopped doing circumcision, that did not, they wanted to look and act like the Egyptians. That did not save them. Exactly the opposite. That brought Jewish anti-Semitism, Egyptian anti-Semitism. It brought its ugly rearing head up into public life. And that was the beginning of the end of Jewish life in Egypt, till the Jewish people were redeemed. But it's not only we're losing the Jews spiritually, this is causing the Jewish people to be physically attacked and annihilated. So we understand that the leaders, the ideological groups behind these, as Rabbi Kahn would always say, there are no Reform Jews, there are no conservative Jews, there are conservative rabbis, there are Reform rabbis. What was he saying? He's saying really the responsibility, the blame, who's going to have to pay the price, those that know a little bit are the leaders. Because the congregation, the congregants know less than they do, and that's not saying a lot. So, question is, in our times, when Jews are so ignorant, whether they're in the conservative or reform, they know nothing. What is the law? And you have to stay tuned, don't touch the dial. God willing, we'll continue next week. In our times, how to look at Jews that belong to the conservative or reform movements. They're not the leaders. They're not the ideology behind it. They're not the Pittsburgh platform. The simple people. How does the Jewish law, how does the Torah today look at them? And God willing, we'll discuss that subject next week, how to look at the congregants, the simple people of these movements. All the best. We should hear good news.